The tray was heavier than it looked, some kind of dense composite polymer, same as everything else at the Kestrahn Combined Services Academy, and I carried it with both hands the way I used to carry junction boxes on the Callahan Riverside, level and easy, watching where I put my feet. The mess hall seated 400. I counted 8 humans in it, spread thin across the room like seeds someone had dropped without caring where they landed. Most of them had found the 2 long tables nearest the service window, the ones nobody else wanted because the ventilation duct above ran warm and the light panels overhead were a slightly different color, more yellow, less blue, which I understood gave vrethani cadets mild ocular discomfort. The humans sat under the yellow light and ate, and the rest of the mess hall left them to it. I didn't go to those tables. I was 3 days into my first intake cycle at Kestrahn, transferred laterally from a provisional enrollment that had taken 8 months of paperwork to arrange. I'd spent those 8 months working demolition on a coastal overpass project, while the documentation moved through 4 different galactic compact offices. I was not in the habit of waiting for a good spot to open up. There was a table near the center windows, rail light coming through, not panel light, actual system-style light diffusing through the polarized glass, and 4 cadets sitting on one side of it, leaving the other bench empty. Vrethani, all 4 of them. 3rd years by the 3-band stripe on their collar. I read the empty bench the way I read scaffolding on a new site, available until someone's standing on it. I set my tray down and Saturday. The cadet directly across from me had a cast ridge that ran from his brow to the back of his skull, the kind that went pronounced when the owner was running an active dominance display. His name tape read SSUUR-D. He looked at me the way structural steel looks at a weld that doesn't belong, like the problem was self-evident and someone competent should have caught it earlier. Humans don't sit here, he said. He said it in standard, which was courteous of him. His cast ridge had gone a shade darker, which I would learn later was the vrethani equivalent of raising your voice. I looked at the bench I was sitting on. I looked at him. I picked up my fork. Transfer cadet, I said. Kalewi, and I started eating. There was a sound in the immediate area that I can only describe as the absence of the sound that had been there before, conversation stopping, trays going still, the low ambient scrape and clatter of 400 cadets at lunch suddenly going quiet in a ring that spread outward from our table like a drop stone hitting water. I didn't look up to watch it spread. I'd learned on my first construction job that if you look up when someone challenges you, you've already lost the argument. You look at the work in front of you. You do the work. The food was adequate. Dense protein blocks that tasted faintly of mineral oil, a grain that expanded when you chewed it, some kind of compressed vegetable matter in a sauce that was trying its best. I'd eaten field rations on 6 different bridge projects. This ranked somewhere in the middle. Dovexure did not respond immediately. The vrethani don't, when the situation doesn't go the expected way. Their social system runs on a call and response logic built over about 40,000 years of hierarchical evolution. The senior signals, the junior defers, the sequence completes and everyone's nervous system settles. When the junior doesn't defer, the sequence hangs open like a door that won't latch, and the vrethani's instinct is to stand very still and wait for the correct resolution to arrive. After about 40 seconds, it hadn't arrived. He looked at the cadet to his left, a broad-shouldered 3rd year whose name tape read Orville, and something passed between them that I wasn't supposed to be able to read. The castridge language. I'd had 2 weeks of mandatory xenosocial briefing before enrollment, which wasn't enough to translate it, but it was enough to know something was being said. Orville stood up. He was considerably larger than Sure, with the kind of build that comes from a vrethani cadet spending 18 months in their physical conditioning program, and he walked around the end of the table slowly, the way a piece of equipment moves when it's very sure of its own mass. He stopped beside me. Transfer cadet, he said, in a register that was about an octave lower than Sure's. This table is claimed. Under mess hall precedent, 3rd year cohort has priority seating designation for the window row. You are in violation of the precedent. I chewed, swallowed, looked up at him. Show me the posting, I said. He blinked. The castridge flickered. The posting. The official seating designation posting. If there's a precedent, it's posted somewhere. Show me where it's posted and I'll move. He didn't answer, because there was no posting. I'd checked the mess hall regulations on my 2nd day, not because I was planning this, but because on any job site, the first thing you do is read the safety postings. You know what the rules are before someone tries to use them against you. The Kestrahn mess hall regulations specified that seating was unassigned during general intake periods. There was a footnote about senior cohort preference during formal dining events, which this wasn't. Orville looked back at Sewer. Another exchange in Cast Ridge. I went back to eating. The sound in the mess hall had not resumed. I was aware of it in the way you're aware of wind stopping on a job site, an absence with weight. I was also aware that somewhere in the room, a proctor was watching. They were always watching, at Kestrahn. The disciplinary observation system was one of the first things covered in the enrollment brief. I had done nothing that violated any regulation I'd been briefed on, and I intended to keep it that way. Sewer stood up. He was taller than I'd estimated from a seated position. Vrethani tend to be. The torso is longer than it looks, and he came around to my side of the table and stood 2 feet from my left shoulder, which in vrethani social geometry is the dominant flanking position. His cast ridge was fully raised now, the ridgeline going dark amber, which even with my limited briefing I understood was a significant display. He stood there. I took a drink of the mineral tasting water. He stood there for what I estimated was about 90 seconds. I know because I was counting, the way you count when you're doing timed concrete pause, without moving your lips, without breaking focus on the thing in front of you. 90 seconds of a senior cadet's full amberage dominance display, directed at a first-week transfer who kept eating lunch. The thing about construction work, the thing that 7 years of it builds into you so deep it stops being a thought and becomes a reflex, is that you learn to distinguish between situations that require action and situations that require you to simply remain. A load-bearing wall doesn't care how loud you talk at it. A footing won't shift because someone is standing next to it being large and amber. The correct response to something that is trying to intimidate you with its presence is to continue doing what you were doing, because if it had a valid structural argument, it would make one. Sewer had not made a structural argument. At 90 seconds, something changed. I didn't see it happen. I heard it in the sound the 3 remaining third years at the table made, a low collective sound, almost below audible, that the briefing materials had described as a social register reset, the vrethani equivalent of breath leaving a room. I glanced up. Sewer's cast ridge was going flat. Not the gradual de-escalation of someone choosing to back down. The involuntary kind. The vrethani dominance display system runs on a feedback loop between the individual and the social environment. If the display runs past a certain duration without producing the expected response, the biology interprets it not as the target failing to comply, but as the display itself failing. The ridge darkening reverses. The scent display inverts. What the rest of the room reads, involuntarily, is not a dominant cadet holding a position. It's a dominant cadet who played his highest card and watched it land wrong. He walked back to his seat. He sat down. I finished the protein block and moved to the grain. The mess hall sound resumed slowly, the way it always does. 1 conversation, then 2, then the ambient level returning, but at a slightly different frequency than before. Lower. More careful. Orville sat back down. He was quiet for a moment. Then he picked up his fork and went back to his food, and there was something careful in the way he did it, something that had recalibrated. The bell for end of meal rang 11 minutes later. I was standing, tray in hand, when I noticed Orville had moved to my side of the table. Not next to me, a respectful gap, 2 seat lengths, but on my side. He hadn't moved his tray back. He'd just reoriented. A minute after that, the cadet whose name tape read Thovoan did the same. Then the third one, whose name I never caught that day. Sewer sat alone on his side of the table, ridge fully flat, looking at his food. I carried my tray to the return window. Nobody said anything to me as I walked. The 8 humans near the service window were watching, and one of them, a woman who'd been enrolled 2 cycles ahead of me, I found out later, gave me a look I didn't have a name for yet. I found one for it eventually. On the construction sites we called it the look you gave a new hire who'd just done something that made the job easier for everyone without announcing they were doing it. I went to my afternoon session and didn't think about it much. The next day at lunch, Orville was already at the center window table when I arrived. He'd left the bench across from him empty. I set my tray down and Saturday. We ate in silence, which suited us both fine.